Welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival, the online festival that asks the questions, what if we could redesign everything? Yesterday, we've kicked off with our live launch in London, and today I'm very pleased to welcome Stephen and Hannah to the DIF. Stephen and Hannah work in a company called Bank and Vogue, who are pioneering in the post-consumer textile space. We all know that textile industry is very wasteful and a lot of pollutants are used in the fabrications. And we're very much aware of the term fast fashion. Just some examples of what we hope to solve with the circular economy. I just want to remember all of you watching this session to comment and questions, since it is an interactive session. There is a comment box on the live session page, or use the hashtag ThinkDiff on Twitter. Hannah, do you want to open the conversation?
Yes, fantastic. Great. We're great to be here. This is great. So Steve, I'm going to throw in and ask you the first question. How can used clothing be used for modern design, and why is it relevant today?
I really love the question that is in front of us, is how can we redesign everything? Because at Beyond Retro, for years, we've been a leader in the vintage business of taking product and finding relevant products for the London and the Swedish market. But what we've been doing for the last 5 years with our remanufacturing is asking exactly the question that King started with. How can we design everything, but it being from used clothes? And so the exciting opportunity for us at Beyond Retro is, it started 5 years ago when we said we were going to buy a cotton tote for our shop, and with the Beyond Retro logo on it. And we literally said to ourselves, why are we buying a cotton tote when we have so much used apparel that is in our factory that there's no market for? How do we redesign everything using used? How do we just start with one item, which is this cotton tote? So we literally took the raincoats that you get, the kind of Burberry style coats, cut them up and made our first bag, the Beyond Retro bag, with the logo on it. And it started this journey for us about just exactly what King said. How can we redesign everything from used? And the really cool thing that's kind of come about, and why we can do this today and we couldn't have done it 10, 15, or 20 years ago, is because the used clothing industry has dramatically changed. In the last 5 years, there's been a consolidation of used clothes. So just to put it in context, in America and England and in Canada, when you donate a bag of clothing to a charity, they go through it, they take out a little bit, put it in their stores. About 25% is sold in thrift stores throughout the United States. But the balance of that is baled up and shipped to one of the 3 major sorting centers around the world: India, Pakistan, Dubai, to be the main specific areas. And so for the first time in history, the reason why we can start designing and building at scale new apparel from used is because there's a massive amalgamation of product in one place. So if you wanted to say, for example, your beautiful floral blouse, if you wanted to make a floral blouse bag, we now can actually make a grade of just floral blouses, and not just make 1 of them or 5 of them or 10 of them, but we can make 1,000 of them. So history has now made it so that because of globalization, because of the consolidation, we can now actually remanufacture apparel into relevant items for the stores. And we started doing it just for Beyond Retro. But so you can walk into a Beyond Retro store and find a mini backpack made from your floral blouse. And so we're so excited about the opportunity in front of us, that today things can be designed from used. And not only can they be designed for used, but they can actually be designed well and relevant with used.
Steve, can you talk us through a bit more about that actual process, the design side? So how you, from the used clothing, how does it be created into a new design?
So one of the things that it starts with, the absolute thing that it first starts with, is amazing talent in the UK. the new economy, this circular economy, this re-engineered economy, starts with a brain trust, a brilliant design in London. So our team, our design team, first our trend department in London sits down and says, okay, what's going to be relevant in SS18 or AW18? What's going to be relevant next fall? What patterns or fabrics are going to be relevant? So as an example, last year, we knew that velvet, printed velvet, is going to be really strong come this Christmas. So the trend-led team said, look, put it on the mood board. We need, and just like the new apparel business does, where they go off and do their fabric fairs, we do our own fabric fairs, which is trend-led. So the trend-led of the fabric fair of velvet was one of the things we put on the mood board. And then we said, well, what bag is relevant? What shape is relevant? So this is the second thing that is really exciting now. And in London and in Sweden, we have incredible design talent. And the design talent is to not only look at the mood board and say what fabrics are relevant, but what designs are relevant. So they take both those pieces of information and we send them to our pickers in these massive factories where they're sorting, and it's hard to get your head around it, but they sort, they would sort every day 350,000 garments a day. So that would be, for argument's sake, about a third of the cities of Stockholm's clothes every day is sorted in one place. But then they'll literally go through and find all the velvet, printed velvet, and they'll make a pile of it and we'll accumulate it over 3 months. Then we'll have 5,000 printed velvet dresses. The next exciting thing is, and what's really exciting about this economy is that it's creating new kinds of employment. The designer in London sits down and says, okay, what can I make with this printed velvet dress? And how can I do it? So she'll make a spec pack, just like a traditional garment manufacturer would. We send the spec pack off to factory. Our factory is in northern India. The team in India will take a velvet dress, will make a toile, just like a normal garment industry, and we'll hand cut the first bag, send back a sample. London will gold seal the sample and on the second sample, and then all of a sudden we've got a relevant mini backpack ready to be made. And the exciting thing is, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask there, like there must be some kind of complexities to using used clothing for remanufacturing. So just, is there some issues you have by each item is unique? It's not the same as using just a roll of fabric?
So certainly, where there are problems, there are opportunities. And going back to King's original question of, could we redesign everything? The exciting thing is that the negative is that every mini backpack that we make, that made from this velvet dress, as an example, every one of them has to be hand cut. So when in a normal garment industry, you would layer out on a cutting table 10 layers or 50 layers of velvet. And then you would use a big cutting knife to be able to cut out each of the patterns, the 9 components that make up that mini backpack. But in our case, because we're doing piece by piece, we literally have to cut everything by hand. However, the exciting thing is that when you go into a Beyond Retro, or you go into an Urban Outfitters in the United States and you see our mini backpacks, what's exciting in terms of the new way of looking at it is that every mini backpack has a different velvet lining. So whether or a different outer. So from a retail point of view, from a new way of looking at it, it makes a much more exciting retail story. And when we're competing against fast fashion, where you go in and you go to a fast fashion store and there's 10 mini backpacks, but they're all exactly the same, used can beat that because each one of ours is completely different. So yes, it's more work, but from a retail point of view, it's much more exciting. It's much more exciting on the shelf. It's much more exciting because every item is unique. And that's what's really exciting, is not only are we redesigning using used, but we're allowing the consumer to express themselves and choose what they really like, whether it's a dark velvet or a gold velvet or a leopard print velvet or one with pandas all over it. It's that each one of those will be unique.
And how do you convey that to your customer? Is there a message you have on your swing tag to?
I think this is one of the big things that's really important to talk about. On the one hand, we're definitely chasing how do we make everything how do we design everything out of used? That's our mission. But really our bigger mission, and it starts with that London team, it starts with the trend led, it starts with the design team, is the real question is, how do we make the most relevant bag? So on the one hand, the first thing we want to do is we want to make something that's relevant and engaging as a product that a consumer is akin to. But on the other hand, we also want to tell them that it's a unique offering. So every swing tag has a swing tag that says, I'm unique. On the back of it, in small print, we actually tell the story of how this was made. But really how it's made is not the leading story. What's the leading story is we're making a relevant, beautiful item. Oh yeah, by the way, is designed from used. Design from used is not the starting position. It's what we want to do because we believe it's right. It's not what we're doing because it's the fashion story. The fashion story is we're making a beautiful bag.
Can you kind of talk us through what your favorite transformation project is using used clothing so far?
So certainly, one of the fun things that we did a couple of years ago, last year, was in the United States, there are 4 million people in prison. And that means there's at least 8 million orange jumpsuits available in the world. And these iconic orange prison jumpsuits have the letters ADC on them, so it'd be like the Alabama Department of Corrections or something. So we took orange prison outfits, cut them up, and we made them into gym bags and totes with the letters on the outside. So we took something that was complete trash, that had no market. Nobody in the second-hand world wanted to buy an orange prison outfit, but we made it into a relevant, engaging story, and it was just a pretty bag. So each one of the items is relevant, and I don't know. It was a great story, and it was a lot of fun as a product.
Yeah, that's so cool. Historically, could you give us an example of redesign that's really inspired you to do what you do?
So it's such what's really exciting about the fact that the DIF is doing this whole conversation about can we design with used? The irony is that for thousands of years, we've been doing this in history. So I went to Egypt, and in the Valley of the Kings, where you go and you see the tombs carved out of the walls, just outside of it, you'll see these massive structures built by pharaohs. And the pharaohs would always steal the building materials from the previous pharaohs to build their massive structures. So architecturally, this is done. And another really great example is if you go to Rome and you look at the Colosseum, this massive Colosseum, 500 years ago, they were taking all the marble off the outside of the Colosseum and they built the Vatican. And the irony is the Vatican is designed from used, just like what we're talking about today. But no one ever talks about the Vatican being an upcycled, remade, sustainable building. It was just convenient. And they took the marble from the Colosseum because if you had to go way to the southern part of Italy to go and pick up marble, it was really expensive. And it was cheap as chips just to steal it off the Colosseum. And now, for the first time, going back to the first question, for the first time in history, clothing can now be remanufactured because it's consolidated, because it's in one place. It also can be remanufactured because of amazing talent, like the people at Beyond Retro, like the design team, like so I'm completely excited about the opportunities in front of us, whether it be the apparel that we're making or whether it be the bags, that we're just doing what frankly people have done in ancient Egypt, and frankly what mothers have done for years is ripped the curtains off and made Susie's dress. But the cool thing is we're making tens of thousands of items at scale, and it's working, and the customer loves it. They love the story.
So what are you really excited about? Are there design aspects and trims you're using right now that really excite you for this process?
So I think the really exciting thing for us is, for both London and Sweden is you can't be a vintage person and not be excited about zippers. In the vintage world, we spend hours talking about zippers, big zippers, metal zippers, big toggled zippers. Like zippers are really quite an exciting thing for us. And some of the old, so you even take some of the Carhartt workwear jackets and you see these big robust zippers and you're like, look at how beautiful this is. And we've incorporated some of the zippers that are literally were going into trash into some of our apparel items. And so, I don't know, what am I excited about? Embarrassingly, I'm excited about zippers. The good Swedish guy that invented the zipper. In the end of the day, we see that there are things available that we can use to remanufacture and remake, and it's just at our hands. Oh, we have a question.
I think we have the question coming through. We have a question from Sally. Do you think the fact vintage has become Sorry, I'm just kind of recapping her question here. Okay, would you be able to step in there and just kind of sum up what she's asking there?
Yeah, sure. So we have a question coming in from Sally. I'll just read through of it, how it came in. Question is, do you think that the fact vintage has become synonymous with a certain type of person who is harmful to greater uptake of this? Does it silo the spread of your post-use clothing?
It's a really good question. And it's absolutely, I actually think that I celebrate that vintage customer, because often when you go to East London, you go to our store in Dalston, or you go to the store off of Brick Lane, or you go to the store in Zinkenstan in Stockholm. Many of the vintage customers are the trend-led guys, the trend-led people. They're the people at the beginning of the crowd. But the interesting thing is that as our project has evolved, Sally, on the remanufacturing, what's exciting for us is we're now crossing over a line. So by selling into Urban Outfitters, that's going from an exclusive vintage customer to a mainstream customer, and to a more mainstream customer. And you'll see we have some projects coming out over the next few months that you'll see more and more products facing a wider audience. I'm excited about that vintage. I think the vintage customer is absolutely the cutting edge of the knife that basically, in Canadian language, clears the snow for other people to walk down the path. And I'm in love with what they've done, but this is what innovators do. And they help us to get to another stage.
Do we have any more questions coming through?
Hannah, I just wanted to talk through as well. The other opportunity isn't just about, and I wanted to bring this up as well, King, that when we talk about design and use, I want to also put out the challenge that you'll see in the next few months, we're coming out with projects that design and use doesn't necessarily have to be a fully remade item that is used. In other words, can used be a component of a new item? And look, we often see this in buildings as an example, where instead of actually doing the full building out of used lumber material, they'll build, let's say, the doors, or they'll do a component of it. So could we imagine, for example, and from a design perspective, a backpack made, but only a back panel made of an exciting fabric? In the end, to us, it is an exciting thing that the design of used can be a fully remanufactured item, but also can be just a component of a new item. And that certainly is still impactful, given that the new clothing industry will make 100 billion garments this year. The possibilities are absolutely endless.
Fantastic. Sorry, King, the questions here on my screen are coming up too small for me to be able to see them on the screen. Would you be able to jump in with the next question?
Yes, of course, I'll jump in. We have a question coming in from Molly. The question is, you're working with big brands like Urban Outfitters, for example. How has the response been from the big business fashion?
So I'm really excited. With Urban, our first drop that we did, the first set of bags that we sent them, in the first 7 days, the sell-through was 48%. So in other words, half the bags sold in 7 days. In terms of retail language, that's an absolute home run. The fun thing is that you see some of the fast fashion guys who in Stockholm are very close to us, who often come into our store. They're scratching their head trying to figure out, wait a minute, these guys are onto something. How do we copy it? And there's no better flattery than somebody coming into your shop. So how have they responded? They're trying to figure out how to do this. And the really exciting thing is we absolutely want more people to do this. We believe that this is something that intuitively we're going to look back at and go, yeah, of course, why weren't we doing this before? Why weren't we using the existing resources? Imagine a pair of jeans. If you take a pair of used jeans, they take 1,600 liters of water to grow enough cotton to make a pair of jeans. So why not take that denim and, as simple as it is, make it into a pair of a jean skirt, which you can get at Beyond Retro. So as time goes on, I think the large fashion houses and the fast fashion guys will realize they're going to do this because it's economical to do it, because it makes a relevant retail story, and because from a design point of view, it's an exciting product on the shop floor. So we see, basically the answer to that question is, how are they responding? They're responding by copying it, which is fantastic. We want them to do it, absolutely.
Yes, that's good. And how is your collaboration with them?
So that's another really exciting thing. The brands, the shops that we're working with, for example, in Bristol, we're working with a shop called Sobeys. And this is a guy that has 5 stores, and he's engaged in they're engaged with our product, and they're continually telling our design team what's working, what's not working, and we're adjusting literally weekly based on the customers' reactions. And we have to remember that this is a conversation about design, but design is as much as about being relevant and trend-led, it also has to be commercially successful. So all of our partners that we're selling this product to, we continually, the design team, yes, we're designing with used. Yes, we're talking about how do we upcycle, what do we have available, what's new and possible, what fabric is relevant, but we're continually having our ear on the track about what's working in terms of the sales. That's a critical element to any success of any commercial product at scale, because that's something that's got to be said as well. It's the real key with this design is not to make 5 of something or 10 of something. It's how do you make it at scale so that not only are we creating new employment in the UK for trends, for design, for our manufacturing, so our head of manufacturing is based out of the UK, but also how do we create new kinds of employment in the new circular economy in our factory in India. We have 130 some odd staff in our factory, and we are literally having to rethink through how do we cut these clothes? How do we cut on scale? How do we do this efficiently? How do we even sort and catalog them? How do we catalog our catalog of fabrics we have available? So this new design and the new design of used is really about rethinking how things are made. The design is the part of the process of how we're doing this actually defines the design in of itself. So I don't know, it's fun to be doing something completely new. And literally we're employing new kinds of tools to do the cutting. We're employing new kinds of sewing machines to do the sewing because it's one of everything that's different.
Yeah, so as you just mentioned now, new kind of tools, new kind of systems. Could you elaborate a bit more on those new kind of tools? I bet our audience would love to hear about new stuff.
Yeah, so one of the, so I'll give you two examples that are really interesting. One is a practical cutting tool. So one of the challenges with cutting something like silk on scale or the polys is that how do you cut it with the scissors and make it, and try to compete against somebody who's going to cut 50 layers deep. So from Italy, we bought this tool called the Sonic Cutter. It's a cool looking tool made in Italy, and it's basically looks like a large pencil, and you have a glass table, you lay the garment on the table, you have your pattern, and using sonic waves, it literally cuts the fabric with the tool. So you can actually touch the end of it, it doesn't burn, but because of the sonic waves, it actually cuts the fabric. And this was a tool that we got at the last ITMA show in Italy, and it's normally used for awning cuttings, single pattern awning cuttings. So it's a tool that's not normally used in the garment industry at scale, but we're using it, and it works absolutely fantastic. But the second tool is interesting is that Beyond Retro is the first company to launch on Amazon, an upcycled bag. We're really excited about it. I mean, if you're going to be on e-commerce, if you're going to participate, you best be on Amazon because they're such kings. But one of the problems about Amazon is that the way their ranking system works is that you have to literally, the number of views that your item gets, the higher it goes on the ranking. The problem is that when you make one of something, you're always going to be at the bottom. So we're having to re-engineer the way in which things are sold so that they can be relevant and viewed by the audience. So designing with used means coming up with new tools to be able to do it, but it also means coming up with new ways to tell the story and to be able to tell the story and show it in a retail setting so that it's relevant and even seen by people.
I think we're on to one of our last questions for this session. We've got a question coming in from Jen. When selecting your fabric range, do you think about the end of life stage of your items, such as implications of disposal?
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly the irony is that if you're going to be really circular, at the end of the day, and we have to take this kind of going back. Remember that we've got all of the product that we get are discarded from shops that they were garments that weren't good enough to go to a charity shop. So then they go to another stage and to a grading house or a facility and say, is this good enough to go to a secondhand market in Central America? No. Or is it really good enough to be in a market in let's say East Africa? And the answer is no. And if there's no end of life for that product, can we then remanufacture it into something else? And then the next question is, can we then remanufacture it once again into something else? And it is something that it's a good challenge from Jen. What's our next thing beyond this? How do we create another circularity beyond the echo that we've already created? And definitely it's something that we've got to keep working on. Because in the end of the day, I will say that there are projects that we will announce in the next few months where we're actually breaking items back down to the fiber. And our product will go back down to it. Ultimately, I think that's where the exciting thing will come from. And it's not designing with used, but it'll be able to take used back to its original fiber, put it back into a fiber, and then reused, and then made into something quote unquote new again from completely recycled. I think that's where the exciting part of for another conversation, where the exciting part of the clothing industry is going to go.
So I think we have time for one last question, and I would like to ask you one overarching question. For our viewers online, what will be the biggest takeout in a circular economy on textiles?
I think the biggest takeaway is that this is possible. You know, I think the biggest takeaway for all of us is not to ask why, because I feel like we've gone past the why. I think all of us need to keep thinking about the how, and how do we design with used, and what are the tools and what are the new employment opportunities, and how do we get people trained up for these? I think the takeaway here is let's keep talking about the how. You know, in the end of the day, this year we'll save 600,000 garments from landfill. You know, in the grand scheme of things, when the industry is making 100 billion garments, our impact, though I'm excited about the volume that we're doing, and we're doing it at the largest scale, I think all of us need to think about how we can make an impact and how we can get this done. The why, we're past the why. It's let's go back to thinking differently. Let's go back to thinking about how do we actually reuse this in manufacturing.
And do you have some small steps for people on how to do it? Some thinking on that?
Yeah, I think, look, I think that, you know, it starts with even the simplest thing in your own wardrobe is how do you take something that you have and do something new with it? And I think that circularity first at home, and also and all of this conversation starts by far with the conversation about consumerism at home. That's the first endemic challenge that as a general trade, we've got to put out this story of buy value and buy quality. That's where it starts, you know. But from a design point of view, I think that there's some really exciting brands out there that are actually taking up the charge of how do I make something for use. And I'd really recommend people go to a Beyond Retro, go to a Sobeys, go to an Urban Outfitters, and vote with their dollars. And it sounds terrible, but the reality is that if people actually support these projects, they're going to be supporting the new kind of design jobs that are created, the new kind of economy, and the new kind of employment. And it sounds terrible, but vote with your dollars.
Okay, I think that is a great summary of what the talk been about. I want to wrap up this one now. Thanks a lot, Stephen and Hannah, for joining this session. It was amazing. For all the viewers, thank you for watching online. Later today, we'll have some more sessions coming up. One that I would really like is Nature is the Technology of the Future by Marco Brajovic and Richard McGowan. Over the 3 weeks, we have loads of more sessions going on. Check out our schedule online. And it is goodbye for now.
Bye.